Tessa James didn't expect to spend her Saturday afternoon pressing a towel to a stranger's bleeding foot. But here she was kneeling in the sand, the tide brushing her knees, and a man wincing under her grip. "Hold still," she said firmly, tightening the makeshift bandage she'd made from her beach wrap. "You stepped on glass, not lava." The man let out a low laugh, his voice deep and rough with pain. "Yeah, tell that to my foot." He was handsome in a clean-cut, ruggedly expensive kind of way. Hair dark and damp from the ocean, strong jaw, and a body that looked like it belonged in a magazine ad for yachts or cologne. But he also looked completely out of place. His swim trunks looked designer, and his sunglasses now perched beside him probably cost more than her rent. Still, he was bleeding, and Tessa was the kind of person who couldn't walk away from someone hurting. Even if that someone looked like he belonged at a 5-star resort and not this quiet little beach on the Carolina coast. "You need stitches," she said, glancing up at him. "There's a clinic about 15 minutes from here. I'll be fine," he replied, then winced as she adjusted the towel. "Okay, maybe not fine, but I'll survive." Tessa narrowed her eyes. "You're not walking on this, I'll drive you. You don't even know me." "You're right. But I also don't want to find out later that some stubborn tourist got an infection and lost a foot after bleeding out on the sand." The man looked at her for a long second, then grinned. "Fair enough, I'm Elias West." "Tessa James," she replied, helping him to his feet. "And you owe me a new beach wrap." He chuckled as she slung his arm over her shoulder and started guiding him up the dunes toward the parking lot. "How about dinner instead?" She glanced at him. "You're seriously asking me out while bleeding all over my leg?" "Just trying to keep it interesting." Tessa shook her head, smiling despite herself. "Let's get you stitched up first, Romeo." The drive to the clinic was short but filled with easy banter. Elias leaned back in the passenger seat, watching her with a curious gaze as she drove. "So, Tessa James, what do you do when you're not saving dumb guys from beach injuries?" "I'm a marine biology student. I work part-time at the aquarium." Elias lifted a brow. "Smart and brave. And underpaid," she added dryly. There was a brief pause. "I run a company." "Oh, what kind of company?" He scratched the back of his neck. "Tech, apps, boring stuff." She didn't press. At that point, she was more focused on getting him inside before he passed out. The nurse at the clinic took one look at the blood-soaked towel and called the doctor immediately. Tessa waited with him, refusing to leave even though he insisted he'd be fine. When the stitches were done and he was given antibiotics and crutches, Elias looked at her like she'd just saved his life. "Seriously, thank you," he said quietly as she helped him back into the car. "You didn't have to stay." "I know," she said, brushing sand off her arm, "but I wanted to." He looked at her, his expression shifting. "You're not like anyone I've met before." Tessa snorted. "You must not get out much," he laughed, but there was something more in his eyes now, something curious, maybe even a little stunned. They got takeout on the way back, cheap tacos from a stand near the highway. He insisted on paying. She rolled her eyes but let him. They ate on the beach, him sitting awkwardly in a chair with his leg propped up, her cross-legged in the sand beside him. He offered her a bite of his food and she took it without thinking. It felt easy, comfortable, like they'd known each other longer than a couple of hours. "So," he said after a while, his voice softer, "do you always rescue strange men at the beach? Only the ones bleeding," she teased. I usually try not to bleed in public." But today seemed like a good day to change that. She laughed, and he watched her with something quiet and intense in his eyes. He said, "I wasn't even supposed to be here today. I was headed to a different beach, but my GPS rerouted me." "Lucky for your foot," she said. "Lucky for me," he said, and this time he didn't look away. Tessa felt her cheeks get warm and she stood quickly. "You need rest. Come on, I'll drive you to wherever you're staying." He hesitated. "Actually, I don't have a place yet. I was going to check into a hotel later." She blinked. "You came to the beach with no hotel reservation?" "I like winging it." "You're insane." "Possibly." She sighed, then bit her lip. "I have a guest house. It's not fancy, but it's clean and it's got a bed. You can stay there until your foot's better." He looked surprised but touched. "You sure? Don't make me regret this, Elias." He leaned on her again as they walked to her car. "You won't." And he didn't. Over the next few days, Elias stayed in her little guest house behind her small cottage. She made him grilled cheese and soup, helped him change his bandages, and brought him books from the library. He asked endless questions about her classes, her work, her life. He listened, really listened, and made her laugh more than anyone had in years. She found herself lingering outside his door each night, not wanting the day to end, and he'd started looking at her like she was something rare. But Tessa had no idea who he really was. No idea that the man limping around her backyard was the founder of one of the biggest tech companies on the East Coast. No idea that he had more money in one investment account than she'd ever see in her entire life. No idea that the millionaire she helped would soon fall hard and completely for her, and she definitely didn't know she'd fall for him too. Tessa pushed open the screen door of the guest house with her elbow, her hands full with a tray. A bowl of lentil stew, a slice of buttered sourdough, and a tall glass of ginger lemonade. The late afternoon sun cast long golden streaks across the yard, catching the edges of Elias's crutches leaning against the porch railing. She nudged the door open farther with her hip. "You decent?" Elias sat on the edge of the small bed, a notebook open on his lap. He looked up, eyes warmer than they had any right to be. "Mostly." "Good enough," she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Don't argue, you skipped breakfast again." "I was writing," he said, closing the notebook. "Lost track of time." "What are you writing?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Something that might turn into something," he replied, non-committal. Tessa pulled the only chair in the room closer. "You don't strike me as the journaling type." He gave her a look, unreadable but not unkind. "You don't strike me as someone who lets strange men stay in her backyard." "Touché," she said, folding her arms, "but I'm not the one hiding a secret." He hesitated only a moment before speaking. "What makes you think I am?" "You hesitate every time I ask what you do for a living," she replied, meeting his gaze. "And no one just shows up in a beach town with no hotel booked in peak season unless they're running from something." He leaned back against the pillows, eyes narrow, thoughtful. "Maybe I'm not running. Maybe I'm just pausing." She tilted her head. "That sounds like something people say when they don't want to admit they're running." Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up the spoon, stirred the stew, and took a bite. "This is great," deflecting with compliments, classic. "I'm not hiding a criminal record if that's what you're worried about." "I wasn't," she said honestly. "But now I'm curious why you felt the need to say that." He laughed, the sound low, almost surprised. "You don't let up, do you?" "Only when I'm asleep." He set the spoon down. "I've been working non-stop for over a decade. I built something that took over my entire life. It got to the point where I couldn't tell what mattered anymore, what was mine and what was just expected of me, so I left. No assistant, no press release, just got in the car and drove." Tessa watched him carefully. "And your foot found my beach. Apparently it has good instincts." She didn't smile. "Is someone looking for you?" "Probably." "Do they know you're here?" "No." She picked up the empty glass and stood. "So you're avoiding your life, not pausing it." He didn't fight her on it. "You ever feel like you're meant for more than your life's giving you?" "All the time," she said quietly. "But I can't afford to drive off into the sunset. I've got loans, bills, responsibilities." He looked at her with something unreadable, part admiration, part guilt. "I envy that." Her brows lifted. "You envy student debt." "I envy the clarity," he said. "You know your limits. I haven't had those in years. I just keep expanding until I forget what I started building in the first place." She sighed. "You'd make a great metaphor if you weren't so annoyingly cryptic." He grinned. "I'll try to be less annoying tomorrow." "You'll try to eat breakfast tomorrow," she corrected, heading toward the door. "Tessa," she paused, hand on the frame, "I'm not trying to lie to you, I just don't know how to be honest without dragging everything else into it." She nodded once. "Then start small. Start with breakfast." That evening, she found herself walking along the shoreline alone, sandals in hand, letting the ocean lap against her ankles. The tide was gentle, the moonlight catching the crests in silver arcs. Her thoughts spun in quiet circles around Elias, around the things he wasn't saying, and the way he always looked like he was on the verge of telling her something important. Back at the house, she poured herself a glass of water and opened the window above the sink. The wind carried the faint sound of a piano. Frowning, she stepped outside. The guesthouse lights glowed softly through the windows, and through the open door drifted the unmistakable strains of music. She crept closer, careful not to startle him. Inside, Elias sat in front of a small electric keyboard she'd forgotten even existed. It had been her father's once before he passed. She hadn't touched it in years. He played carefully, like he was relearning an old language, hesitant but familiar. Something classical but not rigid. It flickered between melancholy and hope. When he saw her, his fingers slowed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to invade. How did you know it was there?" "I saw the cover sticking out from under the bed, figured it was broken." "But it still works." She stepped inside, the music wrapping around her like warmth. "You play?" "I used to, before things got too loud." She didn't ask what he meant. She just sat on the floor, legs tucked under her, and listened as he started again this time, something simpler. A lullaby, maybe. Something that made her heart ache in a way she didn't quite understand. When he stopped, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. "I've been thinking," he said eventually, not looking at her. "About what happens when my foot heals, when I can walk again." She glanced up. "You're planning to disappear again." "I should," he said, "but I don't want to." The words settled between them, quiet and uncertain. She stood slowly. "Then don't." He looked up at her, eyebrows drawn. "It's not that simple." "It never is," she said. "But complicated doesn't mean impossible." She left him there, the keyboard humming faintly as it powered down behind her. In the house, she lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, her fingers tracing the edge of the pillow. She'd let a stranger into her home. A stranger who played music like he'd once loved the world, and now wasn't sure how to love it again. She didn't know who Elias West really was, not yet, but she was starting to care anyway, and that scared her more than anything else. Elias didn't emerge from the guest house until nearly noon, his gait steadier but still careful. The stitches were healing well, but the bruise on his pride lingered. Tessa stood at the kitchen counter, slicing peaches for a tart. She didn't look up when he entered. "I didn't expect you to sleep in that late," she said, her tone neutral but not cold. "I didn't sleep," he replied. "I stayed up thinking." She turned, eyes narrowing slightly. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Whether I should leave before I make things harder for you, that's a choice you're going to make for both of us. I thought I was doing the right thing. You didn't sign up for this." "I didn't sign up for anything," she said, placing the knife down. "But I also didn't ask you to disappear." He stepped forward, the floor creaking under his weight. "I'm not used to this." To what? Being cared about. His silence was answer enough. She wiped her hands on a towel and faced him fully. "You don't have to be used to it. You just have to try." He nodded once, slowly. "Then I will." They didn't speak again until the peach tart was in the oven and the air was thick with sugar and spice. Tessa poured 2 glasses of iced tea and handed him one without a word. He took it and sat across from her at the small breakfast table, his posture uncharacteristically tense. "There's something I should probably tell you," he said after a long pause. She met his gaze but didn't speak. "My name isn't just Elias West. It's Elias Westbrook." The name meant nothing to her at first. Then, slowly, it clicked. Westbrook Industries. A tech empire that had made headlines for acquisitions, innovations, and a CEO who had vanished from public view without explanation months ago. She didn't flinch. "So you're richer than God." He gave a wry smile. "Something like that. And you didn't think to mention this sooner." "I didn't want it to change anything." "Well, it does," she said, standing up. "Not because of the money, but because you kept it from me. I didn't know how to tell you. Every time I've told someone before, it's changed how they looked at me. I didn't want you to see a brand instead of a person." She stared at him, arms folded. "Do you think I'm that shallow?" "No," he said, voice quiet. "That's why I didn't want to risk it." She sat again, slowly. "You're not who I thought you were. I'm still the man who stepped on a bottle and ruined your beach wrap." Tessa didn't laugh. "You have people looking for you, probably, but I've cut off contact, canceled meetings, declined interviews. They'll circle until they get bored or until someone else crashes harder than I did. And what are you doing here? Hiding, healing, playing house?" He looked outside toward the garden she'd planted in raised beds, trying to feel something real again. She followed his gaze. "And am I real enough for that?" He turned toward her, eyes steady. "You're the only thing that's made sense since I walked away." The oven timer dinged, loud and sudden. Neither of them moved for a moment. Tessa stood, pulled out the tart, and set it on the counter to cool. "You still should have told me, I know. But I'm glad you did now." He exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. "So, where does that leave us?" She looked at him over her shoulder. "That depends. Are you planning on disappearing again the second your foot can handle it?" "I'm not sure what I'm planning anymore," he admitted. "But I know I don't want to leave you behind." She turned fully, arms crossed. "Then stop acting like you have to." Later that evening, they drove to the marina. Elias had insisted on taking her out not to a restaurant, but to the water. "I rented a boat," he said casually, as if that was a normal sentence. "You what?" "You said no fancy restaurants, but you didn't say anything about fancy boats." She stared at the sleek white yacht bobbing at the dock. "I was thinking more like a canoe. This has cushions and champagne." "I didn't bring a dress. You look perfect." That silenced her more effectively than any argument. They boarded just before sunset. The captain, silent, professional, nodded once and left them to the upper deck where a table had been set with linen, candles, and a platter of grilled seafood. Tessa sat slowly, eyes scanning the horizon. "You really don't do anything halfway." "I used to. But then I realized halfway doesn't get you very far." The boat moved smoothly across the water, the sky painted in streaks of orange and violet. The city lights flickered in the distance, but here, the world felt small and quiet. They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. The silence stretched comfortably between them, filled with glances and small smiles and the occasional clink of silverware. After dinner, Elias stood and offered her his hand. "Come here." She hesitated. "Why?" "Because I want to dance with you. There's no music. I don't need any." She let him pull her to her feet. His hand rested at her waist, the other holding her fingers gently. They moved slowly, the waves beneath them soft and rhythmic. "You're not what I expected," she said quietly. "I never am." She looked up at him. "I don't know what this is." "It doesn't have to be anything yet," he said. "But I know I've never felt more alive than I have with you." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'm scared of what happens when you go back. I'm scared of what happens if I don't." They didn't solve anything that night. They didn't define what they were or where they were going. But when he kissed her slow and sure, with the stars above and the ocean all around, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had planned for, and neither of them wanted to lose. Tessa stepped off the porch, the screen door clicking shut behind her as she crossed the soft grass toward the guest house, the morning sun warming her shoulders. A week had passed since the boat, since the dance. Since the kiss that had left her standing barefoot on a teak deck, wondering what the hell she'd just fallen into. Elias was sitting on the small bench outside, his crutches propped beside him, a half-empty cup of coffee balanced on one knee and a folded newspaper in his lap. Not digital. Actual newsprint. She hadn't seen one in years. "You're up early," she said, brushing a curl away from her cheek. "I've been up for hours," he replied, folding the paper and setting it aside. "Thinking?" She raised a brow. "Does thinking always involve the business section?" "Today it does." He stood carefully, no longer needing the crutches but still favoring his healing foot. He walked toward her, hands in the pockets of the navy linen pants he'd somehow made look like they belonged in a magazine spread. I need to go back, he said without hesitation. Tessa didn't flinch. When? Tomorrow. The word dropped like a stone between them, but she didn't look away. You've already booked it, he nodded. Private jet sunrise. I'll be in New York before the bakery down the street even opens. She nodded slowly once. Okay. That's it. You were never staying, she said. We both knew that. I didn't expect it to feel like this. His voice dropped, rough around the edges. I thought I could disappear for a while, catch my breath, and then go back like nothing changed. But then you happened. She crossed her arms, not to hold him out, but to hold herself in. So stay. I can't. There's too much waiting for me. Contracts, board votes. A merger that could collapse without my name on it. Sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also mine, and I built it. She watched him for a long moment, the breeze carrying the scent of salt and sun between them. So what do you want from me, Elias? A goodbye? Or a promise to wait? I want you to come with me. Tessa blinked. What? Just for a week, see my world, you've seen mine, it's only fair. I have classes, work, a reef tank that doesn't clean itself. I'll cover everything, he said quickly. The classes, the job, just 1 week. Everything will be waiting when you get back. She stepped back, not from fear, but from sheer overwhelm. You think I can just drop my life because you asked nicely? No, he said, stepping forward again. I think you're capable of making your own choice. And I'm asking you to make one. She stared at him, her heart pounding louder than the gulls circling overhead. Why me? He didn't hesitate. Because you didn't care who I was. You didn't want anything from me. You treated me like a man, not a name, not a stock symbol. And every second I've spent with you has made me more certain that I don't want to go back to that world without you in it. Tessa swallowed hard. If I come with you and hate it, then we fly back and I stay here, or we figure out something else. But I need to try. She didn't answer right away. That evening she stood on the edge of the dock, watching the sun melt into the horizon, her phone buzzing quietly in her hand. The aquarium had approved her emergency leave. Her professor had emailed back, confirming she could make up the missed lab hours next semester. She turned as footsteps approached. Elias didn't say anything at first, just stopped beside her, looking out at the same gold-drenched sky. You sure about this? She asked. No, he said. I'm terrified, she laughed softly. Good, I'd hate to be the only one panicking. They left at sunrise. The jet was sleek, impossibly quiet, and stocked with everything from champagne to silk blankets. Tessa sat beside him barefoot, legs tucked under her, flipping through a book she barely read. New York was cold. Fast. Loud. So different from the gentle hush of her beach town it nearly knocked the breath out of her. But Elias never let go of her hand, not once. He took her to meetings where men in suits paused mid-sentence the moment she entered the room. He introduced her not as a guest, not as a friend. This is Tessa, he said at every turn. She's with me. He showed her his world, the penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, the innovation lab buzzing with ideas, the gallery he funded but never visited. He gave her space to breathe but never let her drift, and slowly she began to see the man behind the empire. The one who stayed up late sketching ideas on napkins. The one who refused to hire people who didn't treat their interns with respect. The one who carried her photo in his wallet, not his phone. One night in his apartment, she stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing one of his shirts, sipping tea while the city glittered beneath them. You're quieter here, she said. There's more noise to cut through. She reached for his hand. You're not who I expected, he looked up at her. Neither are you. He walked her to a rooftop garden the next afternoon. It was winterized, the trees bare, but the skyline stretched endlessly behind them. I bought this building 2 years ago, he said. Never used the rooftop, thought it was a waste of space. Tessa turned slowly. In the center sat a table candlelit with 2 chairs and a small meal already steaming in the cold air. You did this. I wanted to give you something that felt like home. There's no sand and the ocean's a few hundred miles off, but it's quiet and it's ours. She stepped toward him. Why are you doing this? Because I love you, he said, voice steady. And I want you to know it before you decide anything else. Her breath caught in her throat. You love me. I didn't plan on it. I didn't even see it coming, but I do. And I'm not going to pretend I don't. She stared at him, heart breaking open. I don't know where this ends, Elias. Then let's stop worrying about the end, he said. Let's just start with now. She didn't answer in words. She kissed him, hands tangled in his collar, the city roaring below but silent in her ears. Months later, after the semester ended, she stood in a white dress on that same rooftop. Not a wedding gown, not yet. Just a promise. Friends gathered close. A string quartet played softly. And Elias, in a charcoal suit with no tie, leaned in and whispered, I still owe you a new beach wrap. She laughed, eyes shining. You gave me a life instead. He kissed her under the city stars, and this time neither of them was running, they had already arrived. Tessa adjusted the strap of her leather satchel as she stepped into the Westbrook Innovation Center's lobby, her heels clicking on the polished marble. The air inside was crisp, scented faintly with eucalyptus and success. She'd put off visiting Elias's professional world again for weeks, but today wasn't about hesitation, it was about permanence. Miss James. A receptionist called from behind a curved glass desk. He's expecting you, top floor. Tessa nodded politely and made her way to the private elevator. As the doors closed behind her, she caught her own reflection in the mirrored panel. Her hair was swept into a loose knot, her lips painted in a shade of plum she wouldn't have dared wear 6 months ago. But she wasn't the same woman anymore. When the elevator doors opened, Elias was already waiting, pacing slowly near the window wall. He turned the moment he heard her step out, his expression unreadable but alert. You're early, he said, walking toward her. I didn't want to wait another minute, she replied, setting the satchel down on the nearest table. We have things to sort out. He stopped, watching her carefully. Are you all right? She nodded. I am. I've been thinking about what comes next. For us, Elias tucked his hands into the pockets of his slate-gray trousers. I'll cancel every meeting today if it means I get to have this conversation with you without interruption. You don't have to cancel anything, she said, stepping closer. You just have to listen. He gave a small nod. I'm not interested in becoming someone who lives in shadows of boardrooms or follows you from city to city waiting for you to come home, she said clearly. But I also don't want to go back to pretending the last few months didn't change everything. Elias's jaw tightened slightly. They changed everything for me too. I've been holding meetings half-present, drafting contracts I don't care about, and thinking about how to make this life work with you in it. Then stop trying to fit me into your world, she said. Let's build one together. He took a step forward. What does that look like to you? A research grant, she said. Privately funded. A facility near the coast. I've already drawn up the proposal. I want to help marine conservation on a larger scale than I ever could before, and I want the Westbrook Foundation to back it. His eyebrows lifted. You're pitching me a partnership? I'm telling you I want to be your equal, she said. Not your ornament, not your secret. I want something of my own that we can build together. Elias reached for the folder she pulled from the satchel. He flipped through the pages, clear blueprints, projected budgets, environmental outreach models, all meticulously detailed. This is brilliant, he said, his voice low. And I would fund it even if I didn't love you, but because I do, I want to give you more than just money. I want to build that facility with you, not just as a donor, as your partner, Tessa swallowed. That's what I was hoping you'd say. He closed the folder gently and looked at her with something new in his eyes, resolve, and something quieter, almost reverent. I bought a house, he said. She blinked. What? On the coast, he continued. Near your hometown. It's not the penthouse or the yacht or the skyline, but it's real, and it's quiet. I thought maybe we could start there. You bought a house, she repeated, stunned. Without asking me. It has a greenhouse and a view of the water, and a room that would be perfect for your research equipment. I wanted it to be a surprise, but now it feels like the right time to tell you everything. She laughed, unable to stop herself. You really don't do anything small. He stepped forward, took her hands in his. Only when it comes to love. That's the one thing I want to go big on, every time. She stared at him, heart full, eyes burning. You're serious about all of this? I've never been more serious about anything, he said. Tessa, I walked away from an empire once because I couldn't breathe. Then you walked into my life and reminded me what it felt like to want something again. I'm not letting you go, not now. Not ever. Outside the window, the sky was a deep blue, streaked with clouds. She could see her reflection in the glass, hers and his. Two people facing the world, not alone, not separate, but together. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a small velvet box. You're not the only one who can plan surprises, she said. Elias raised an eyebrow as she opened it. Inside was a silver ring, simple and elegant, engraved with the coordinates of the beach where they met. This isn't a proposal, she said. Not yet, but it's a promise. That I'm not going anywhere. He took the ring, turning it over in his palm, then slid it onto his finger without hesitation. You really think I'd let you beat me to the grand gesture? He asked softly. Then he pulled a small black box from his own pocket. Tessa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You didn't. I did. He opened it. Inside was a gold ring studded with a single pale blue sapphire shaped like a teardrop. The inside was engraved with the words, You're the calm in my storm. He dropped to one knee. Tessa James, will you marry me? She didn't hesitate. Yes. The office burst into quiet applause as the staff who'd been watching silently from behind glass walls cheered. Elias stood, lifting her off her feet in one swift motion, kissing her as the city buzzed beneath them. The wedding was held 6 weeks later on the beach where they first met. The sun was high, the waves gentle, and the sky cloudless. Tessa wore a dress made of lace that shimmered like sea foam. Elias stood barefoot in the sand, waiting for her like he'd been waiting his whole life. They exchanged vows in front of a small group of family and friends, the wind carrying their words out over the ocean. Afterward, they danced under strings of golden lights, their first dance slow and close, the music soft and full of promises. The house Elias had bought turned out to be perfect. Tessa's research center opened the following spring, backed by the Westbrook Foundation and co-led by a team of scientists she admired. Elias split his time between running the tech company and deepening his roots in her world, often hosting fundraising galas barefoot on the beach. They planted a lemon tree in the backyard and named it after the week they met. Every anniversary, they returned to the spot on the sand where she first pressed a towel to his foot and told him to stop whining. They never stopped building, never stopped choosing each other. And every single morning, Elias woke up to the woman who had taught him what love looked like, when it wasn't trying to impress anyone, only trying to last.